Welcome to Inside Social Care, the podcast that takes you behind the scenes of the care industry. Join us as we explore the challenges, celebrate the triumphs, and shine a spotlight on the incredible people who make up the social care workforce. From personal stories to policy deep dives, we're here to give you an unfiltered look at the heart of our communities. This is Inside Social Care, and this is where we start the conversation. My guest today is one of the most recognisable faces in Scottish entrepreneurship. His day job is the founder and chair of Renaissance Care, and amongst many other projects has recently launched the Social Care Foundation to promote the urgent and meaningful reform of the sector. He is the King of Kirkcaldy, the father of 4 seasons, and a son of Scotland. Welcome to the pod, Robert Kilgour.
But thank you, Charles. You're also, in a way, a son of Kirkcaldy, because didn't you do your hospital?
I did.
As a doctor, memory at Victoria Hospital.
I did a few rotations at the Victoria Hospital in general medicine and care of the elderly, and honed my my medical skills on the good burgers of Kirkcaldy. So I apologise to them for that. But that was a while ago.
They still talk about it in the pubs and cafes in Kirkcaldy. So there you go. You're infamous.
There you go. One of my friends is currently an obstetrician there as well, so he has a good time in Kirkcaldy.
Good.
Anyway, Robert, thank you very much for coming along today. I know that you have a lot of projects ongoing and are a very busy man, but one of your most recent things that you've launched is the Social Care Foundation. Tell me about that.
Yeah, well, I set it up in the run-up to the general election in anticipation of social care becoming hopefully more of an issue during the general election, which it sadly didn't, and certainly after the general election, because I was very concerned that whichever government got in, and most likely obviously Labour, that it would be just being kicked down the road again. And so about a year before, in the autumn of launched it in the autumn of 23, ready for the general election coming in 24, and set it up with the usual difficulties of opening a bank account and all the usual fun and games, particularly opening a bank account where, you can't provide a business plan or, all this to the bank of how it's going to look and how it's going to work. But anyway, I got all the mechanics done, if you like, well in advance, and then really was waiting for the result. But obviously I didn't have long to wait after the general election for the shit to hit the fan as far as social care, because I know a lot of people did expect Labour to have a more positive view on social care, but I certainly was pretty negative about. I like Wes Streeting. I think he's very capable, very, very capable. One of the few, actually, I think. And
he's not afraid, I think, to knock some heads together.
Oh no, yeah, and so I was very pleased that he was given that role, and I did feel, but I was worried that they would kick the can down the road. And on social care, I didn't expect them to make it a priority, but I didn't expect, and I did expect them to kick the can down the road with it. So,
but when you say kick the can, I guess this is probably what you're hoping to achieve with the Social Care Foundation. But when you say kick the can down the road, what is the can that they're kicking?
Social care reform.
And what does that mean to you?
Well, it means accepting that it's not working. Accepting that you can't fix the NHS without first fixing social care. And when you speak to politicians of all parties individually about this, they all accept that you can't, but then it doesn't happen. I was pleased with Wes Streeting being appointed, because they're very capable and not, as you say, not prepared, not shy at banging a few heads. I didn't expect them to make it a priority. They didn't. I did expect them to kick the can down the road. They did with the Casey Commission. But what I completely didn't expect them to do is actually make things worse. So I didn't expect them to make it a priority and try and make it better immediately. And I didn't expect them to roll their sleeves up with a massive majority and just put some reform through. But I really didn't expect them to make the situation far worse, which
That
have
do you mean
done.
by that? Do you mean changes to employer national insurance contributions?
Totally, particularly the lowering of the threshold.
Yeah.
I mean, going from 13.8 up to 15%, they keep talking about that as being a 1.2% increase. Well, it's not a 1.2% increase. It's about an 8.7% increase, because 13.8 going up to 15 is an 8.7.
And the threshold for when they start kicking in is that much lower that it has a disproportionate impact on the workforce in social care.
It was 9,100, and they reduced it from April this year. But they announced it last October, from 9,100 5,000. Three sectors that were particularly hard hit were retail, hospitality, and care.
And do you know across Renaissance Care or across the average care home or whatever, what is the impact on that in terms of the cost to deliver the service? I mean, do you know how much more it's cost? You might not want to share, but
I'm happy to share. It's cost Renaissance Care £900,000 extra a year, unbudgeted, unexpected, and that started in April this year, a few months ago.
And you have, and just to put that in perspective, Renaissance Care, obviously you're a big provider, but you've got 20 homes, I think, and about 1,700.
About 1,500 staff.
Well, that's a lot. So almost £1 million for 1,500 staff is a huge amount of money.
It's 900,000, and it is probably, you're talking about £1,200 per resident that we're caring for. You can divide the 900,000 by 1,500 as far as how much per staff. Is that £600-700 per member of staff, and it's about £1,100 probably, £1,100 per resident.
And I guess the narrative that it's not a tax on working people is obviously not the case here, because that £600 or £700 per staff, which is a lot of money, is not going to be going back in any form of wage increase or pay increase to those teams, right? If your business has to weather a £900,000 increased tax bill, it really does squeeze your.
It's a fallacy to say it wasn't going to hit working people. I mean, it has hit working people, because we've got less available money to pay our staff more. We'd love to pay our staff more. I mean, one of the problems, I mean, it's different in England, particularly in the south of England, but I don't think we're untypical, Renaissance Care as a group, but it's about 70% of our residents are local authority funded, and 30% are private. And when your main customer, i.e. the government in various forms, whether it's local government, Scottish government, UK government, the money flows up and down, is when they won't pay the true cost of care. And when in Scotland, 90% of care home beds are provided by the independent and voluntary sector, and 10% are the local authorities, or in Highland area, it's NHS Highland that do it, which is another point. I think NHS should do it to have joined up writing and to reduce bed blocking, I think.
Well, actually,
I think we should almost take, I would be in favour of, I mean, that's me personally, I'd be in favour of taking local authorities out of the equation altogether.
Well, I mean, interesting concept, because I guess there's a good natural experiment going on there, and NHS Highland providing a lot of community services. I mean, again, back to when I was a doctor, the two biggest failure points in the hospital were, one, in admissions, and two, discharge. And essentially those were points where the interface between local authority pot of funding delivering care in the community and central government NHS funding delivering secondary care, and the incentive structures were so clearly misaligned. We'll take the discharge problem. You'd be going around on your ward round. Let's say you've got 30 patients under your care on a care of the elderly ward. At any given time, probably 30-40% of them are MFFD, medically fit for discharge, and are unable to get out into the community. And I remember so clearly that it was a breakdown between these two organizations not being able to work together, because for the for the local authority who is meant to be taking on the care of that person who's languishing in a hospital bed, they are not incentivized because then it has to come out of their budget to try and get that person at home. And the really sad reality of it is, if you are an elderly person sitting in a hospital bed for days, let alone weeks or months, the amount of decompensation you do and your ability to recover from that and go on and live a healthy life is, it's extremely.
Well, you're going to go backwards.
And there's a human tragedy as well. I mean, you see people frequently dying because of this. Because if you're 85 years old and you're in a hospital bed, you're going to get a lower respiratory tract infection or a urinary tract infection. I mean, it's just it's what happens.
I think there needs to be more integration between NHS and social care.
So just to that point then, Robert, you say that a lot of social care provision is done by NHS Highlands. That's a good natural experiment of seeing the same organisation having an overview of the whole thing. Does that work?
It seems to. I only have one care home in Highland, which is in Inverness, and it seems to. But maybe it should be a case study. But as in Germany and I believe also in Japan, by law, you have to, when there's no longer a clinical need for somebody to be in hospital, by law, there has to be, they have to be found a place either with home care or in a care home. And that has to be done by a mixture of hospital funding and local authority funding. So as far as UK is concerned, it's not only better for the taxpayer, it's better, more importantly, it's better for the person in the middle of all this. It's better for them. It's a win-win. And but as you said, the local authorities are strapped for cash, so they want to keep them in the hospital. Hospitals desperately trying to get them out because it might be 4,000 or more a week, the cost of keeping them in hospital. And meanwhile, you and I, as UK taxpayers, are footing the bill of this malarkey. But it can be a win for the taxpayer and a win for the elderly person if we either find some legal way. And I'm working on an initiative behind the scenes on this at the moment, have been for almost a year, on finding a legal way that NHS Scotland have to, when somebody no longer has a clinical need to be in hospital, legally they have to fund them going into home care or a care home for a number of weeks. And then alongside that, parallel to that, is you have legal requirement on local authorities at the end of that 6 or 8 week period to pick up the cost, and that way the person gets the care that's needed for them at the right time once they're clinically assessed as not needing to be in hospital, and that the taxpayer gets a good deal, and also potentially, because this is going wrong, therefore there's more bed blocking, there's more cancelled operations, longer NHS waiting lists, and therefore if this was done, I firmly believe there would be less bed blocking, less cancelled operations, and NHS waiting lists would come down.
So just to be clear, your proposal for removing these conflicting incentives is what? That social care funding should be centrally managed rather than by local authorities?
Yeah, it should be. I think.
Was that the idea of the mooted National Care Service in Scotland?
Well, that was what I hoped that it would morph into, but it didn't, because it was all about, they spent £30 million on it and delivered not one single extra hour of care was delivered for that £30 million. Sadly, it was all a electioneering marketing exercise by the SNP Scottish Government, and it was all about central control. They were wanting to take away control from local authorities, but instead of giving it to the NHS, they wanted to give it to ministers in government. If we had this system of taking, well, you haven't been a GP, you were never a GP, were you?
No, sir.
No. As far as I understand it, the NHS contracts with GPs, with dentists, etc. Then why can't the NHS contract with care homes, whether they're local authority care homes, voluntary sector care homes, or independent sector care homes in the same way? Why can't that be done? So that's where my sort of thoughts are, and I think that hopefully will come out in the Social Care Foundation report, which we're publishing on September
Interesting.
The 10th. But what I did post the election, and actually in the run up to the budget, I appointed Damien Green as chairman of the Social Care Foundation, ex-MP, ex-deputy prime minister, and with a passion for social care and a proven passion for social care. What I was concerned about was I was founder and chairman of Social Care Foundation, and I was in the process of putting an advisory council together post the election. But then, because of stuff happening like in the run up to the budget, I was feeling my best role is probably as Mr. Angry, if you like. And it's a role I seem to sadly enjoy, I think. The Social Care Foundation needs to be cross-party, building consensus, that kind of thing. And so I thought I need to find a new chairman. And Damien had lost his seat in the July election last year, and he was up for getting involved in the sector, and he asked me for help in finding a role for him in the sector to get his sleeves rolled up and get stuck in. A lot of people forget about Damien that he was originally a journalist before he became an MP, and so he's really good at putting a concise
story together. Yeah,
story together. He's very good at doing that. Unlike a lot of politicians, frankly, that are hopeless at it post when they're no longer an MP or a government minister. So Damien became chairman, and we pulled together an advisory council between us of the great and the good. And that was to try and come up with a new approach to pushing for social care reform that was very much in the reasoning, as I explained earlier, in setting it up. And then it was about, right, what should we do to play our part in this process? But things like the budget, the ban on overseas visas, immigration changes, etc., staffing and funding being, as everyone knows, the two biggest issues in social care. The Casey Commission reporting 2028, its final report, which there's an election in 2020, well, either autumn 28 or more likely spring 29, which means that there won't be anything that comes out in the Casey Commission won't be implemented till after the next general election, therefore 2030 or 31. Social care can't wait. I mean,
and who knows who's
now?
Who knows who's going to be in government then? And I fear, so, you talk about marketing ploys. I fear that, the word from within the sector, which is, as you say, funding, lack of, and it going to the wrong place, funding via the wrong places, and staffing are obviously the two biggest challenges from within the sector. But when the government talks about social care reform, they're not talking about that. They're talking about what the public cares about, which is whether they need to sell their house to pay for their care. And I think the idea that there's just a very big disconnect there between what the sector expects is going to happen and what's actually going to be the priority of any kind of reform.
Yeah, the other issue which has improved post-COVID is health and social care was traditionally, and has always been traditionally, if you like, slow to engage with new technology, etc. But actually, during COVID, I think that improved. And a lot of us in the sector were determined that heightened platform of use of technology, instead of slipping back, would actually be used as a platform to do more. So I think working smarter and more use of technology, and now AI, is certainly helping on a number of fronts. But yes, funding and staffing are the two big issues. But every time you speak to anyone involving the Treasury, and I used to speak to Jeremy Hunt when he was Chancellor about this, and when he was Secretary of State for Health before, with being Foreign Secretary in the middle. But their eyes glaze over when you say we need more money. But actually, I would rather approach it saying that we need to make better use of the money that is being spent on health and social care at the moment.
Well, I think that's a very good point, Robert, because I guess the fear, people's eyes do glaze over because everyone needs more money and there isn't more money to give.
Speaking to them, if you say social care needs more funding, their eyes glaze over and you've lost them. Maybe speak to them and say, actually, your main focus should be on, and that's what I would like, because I think Baroness Casey has already been told, don't come back in our brief. Don't come back in 2028 saying we need to spend a whole load more money.
I think the reality as well is, Robert, is that, if you look at the demographic change coming over the hill over the next 20 years as well, I think everyone's very scared of the amount of money that's going to be required. And
and they're quite right to be, because the demographics that are good for the sector from the point of view of, do we have a solid future requirement for our services into the future from an investment point of view? Yes, we do. But that is equally bad for the public purse and the government funding, which is why it's even more important that before things get even worse than they currently are, we look at, are we spending as efficiently on health and social care? Is there enough joint up writing? I think Andy Burnham, a very capable guy, another one, like, in my view, like Wes Streeting, not afraid of banging heads together, who's current mayor of Manchester. He was an ex-health and social care secretary. And I think he's doing a joined up writing experiment on quite a large scale in the Manchester area. So that's another area that I would hope that Baroness Casey is looking at, Manchester in particular, because I don't think Scotland comes into a remit, although it wouldn't do her any harm to look at Highland. How is it working in Highland? How is it working in Manchester? And can we make better, more efficient use of taxpayers' money and provide a better
service?
A better service. I mean, it's a win-win, and that is on funding. That's what I would like the focus to be on, not we need more money, because everybody knows there's not the money there. So you need to look at it differently. So I'm hoping that the Social Care Foundation's sort of guideline report, we're really coming out with this report on the 10th of September as a guide to Baroness, and some advice to Baroness Casey about what she could or should be looking at, because social care can't wait till 2030, 2031. Yeah. It just can't. And they seem to forget, back to what I said earlier, that you cannot fix the NHS without first fixing social care. And social care is bigger in size than the NHS. And if social care collapses, then what's going to happen to the NHS? Well, I don't think it's rocket science. No. I mean, I'm a fairly simple guy. I don't think it's rocket science.
It's bigger than the NHS in size, but about 20% of the budget, I think. Maybe don't quote me on that exact number, but yeah, it definitely receive a lot less than the NHS. We could blether on about this for a long time. Yeah. I'm sure people are going to be very interested to see what the report from the Social Care Foundation is. So I'll include the link in the show notes so people can go and have a look at it. But I wanted to switch track a little bit and talk a little bit about your own journey in social care, because I believe you've been in the game now for 45 years. Well, 35 years.
Yeah.
You paused there. If you were a young, sightly Robert Kilgour back in 1989 or 90 or whatever it was, and you were sitting in that same seat today, would you do it again?
Yes. Well, I mean, I didn't do it voluntarily. Well, I did it by accident, and I could say I had a full head of hair when I started. And look at this now. That's what you've got to look forward. You've got that to look forward to if you're still doing it at my advanced years. I founded Four Seasons Healthcare in 1988 and opened my first care home in June 89 in Kirkcaldy, the previously said Kirkcaldy.
May 1989. That was when I was born, Robert.
Wow.
There you go.
Well, but I opened it I bought a property in 87. I'd sold a hotel I'd built up over 5 years and sold it in Edinburgh, moved back to Fife with a young family and bought a closed hotel in Kirkcaldy and was planning to turn it into flats because there were grants available, really good grants available for converting property into housing. So that's what I was going to do. But between buying the property with the profits that I'd made from 5 years of running the hotel and selling the hotel in Edinburgh, and submitting a planning application, they changed the rules. The only developments less than 6 flats got the grant, and my development was for 31 flats. So I lost what was in effect, because I wasn't a builder. This was my developer's profit, if you like, the grant. And so I was left with an empty building, not much left in the way, well, a little bit left in the way of capital, but an empty building, big site in the centre of Kirkcaldy opposite the train station. It was the station hotel in Kirkcaldy. And what was I going to do with it? And a friend of a friend suggested care home.
By the nurses' accommodation?
No, it's next door to the Adam Smith Theatre.
Okay, right, yeah. So
and across from the park and the museum,
okay,
art gallery and station. Long-standing hotel, big site. So a friend of a friend said, you must speak to this guy, Tom Brown. He's a QS. He's a partner in an architectural firm in Edinburgh. And he's also a partner in a care home business called Elder Homes in Edinburgh. He might have some ideas. And thanks to Tom and the directors at Elder Homes, who showed me around their homes that were they weren't new build, they were converted buildings, which is what I had. And thanks to their encouragement and Tom's help as a QS and his architectural firm's help, in fact, I ultimately became a director of that firm. And that's how in May, June 89, I opened my first care home. And the whole intention of doing that was to get myself out of a hole, basically. And my intention, once it was full, was just to sell it. But actually, I quite enjoyed it. I like people and I like property. And I just thought, I might do a few more of these. And that is really where Four Seasons began to grow. And ultimately, when I left in spring of 2000, 11 years later, if you like, we had 101 homes all over the UK and over 7,000 staff. And that's where the No Hair came from.
And I'm sure that was a pretty fascinating journey in its own right.
It was a real roller coaster ride, and we came close to going under on a number of occasions. It was pretty.
Why did you come close to going under?
Well, because we were
like leveraged up.
Trying to go too fast, too quickly. Some of the mistakes, which I'll mention in a minute, that we made as a company, as a board, I've tried in Renaissance Care to not do the same thing. We had too many outliers. Our homes were all over the place. And that was my fault, because I was in charge of acquisitions. So we didn't have clusters. And certainly in Renaissance Care, I've tried to grow the company in clusters, so that in Aberdeen we've got 6 homes of varying sizes, and that there is a self-help cluster there. Each of those homes has a staff bank, but then we have a greater, if you like, Aberdeen staff bank, which helps keep agency costs down. I mean, at Renaissance Care, our agency costs are, the last 12 months have averaged 1.2%. And so that was a mistake we made, too many outliers. We also didn't develop obviously technology wasn't as advanced then, but we didn't have our technology right. Operational management systems, our financial management systems were way behind the growth of the company. And that meant that our monthly management accounts we used to get them about, and this is true, 7 or 8 weeks after the month end. Whereas now, obviously, Renaissance, we get them on the 10th, 11th, as is necessary, particularly in a lower margin business. We were a higher margin sector then than we are now. And therefore that, if you like, was one of the things too.
Yeah, that means you could live with those inefficiencies.
Saved us. The other thing was we developed our senior management team behind the acquisitions. So acquisitions came first, and then you tried to throw a senior management team to run those acquisitions together. What I've tried to do, when I left in 2000 and I had a 3-year non-compete, which I would have signed a 30-year non-compete. I had no intention of going anywhere near. I was exhausted, a care home again. But 3 years later, when I made my final financial exit from Four Seasons, when Alchemy sold, they were a good private equity partner. That
Did your hair grow back at that point?
Well, no, but I did the deal with them in summer, autumn 99. I found them a really good, Martin Bolland and John Moulton. I found they were really good. And I left a chunk in that I got out majority of my exit, I got out when they exited, which was in 2004. And by that time, I'd been involved in businesses from local radio to technology companies and other things. Most of those I still have and am involved in a non-exec capacity. But actually, I missed, back to the people and property again, I missed the care sector. And no, my hair didn't grow back, but my energy and enthusiasm for the sector did. And that's when I founded Renaissance Care in 2004. But I wanted it to be a slower growth. I wanted it just to be in Scotland, and I wanted it to be learning the lessons, if you like, that I've just talked about from Four Seasons, more in clusters, put the senior management team in place ahead of the acquisitions and expansion, and make sure your operational systems and financial management systems are really at the top of the available technology at the time, which obviously we're in good shape these days in 2025 for that kind of support, which helps you run the homes you've got better, which is incredibly important in a lower margin sector. We're a lower margin sector post-COVID than pre-COVID, and you have to adjust and adapt to that. And you need to be more on the button with that. But it also helps you integrate acquisitions. And actually, with our business modeling system that we have, you can actually plug in potential acquisitions and compare A to B or to C or to D. So I'm very, we've got a very, very challenging climate at the moment, but I'm still positive about the sector. I'm committed long term to the sector. I'm excited about the future for Renaissance Care. And but on your staffing issue coming out of COVID, I felt a few things. I felt that the boot was going to be on the other foot as far as between employer and employee coming out of COVID. I felt that people's priorities on the work-life balance had been changed through the experience of the pandemic.
What do you mean? Sorry, what do you mean by that?
Well, the priority of work against work-life balance.
As in, you think people shifted more to leisure or to life?
To life. I felt that very, very strongly. And so in April 22, I convinced, because 50% of my role is to come up with a strategy and vision, which includes acquisitions. And the other 50% is selling that strategy and vision to the senior management team who have to deliver it to the front line. And because you can never properly scale a business successfully unless you meaningfully and properly delegate. And that is key. And the other thing my father used to say to me is never be afraid as an entrepreneur to surround yourself with people cleverer than you. And I've never had a problem with that and do that. And I have always done that in everything I'm involved with. But
sorry, carry on.
No, just saying, April 22, I felt that because I wasn't involved in the day-to-day, I was able to look at things. Okay, right, we're coming out of COVID. What does new post-COVID world look like, both UK-wide, workforce-wise? What could or should we be doing differently? Because I know a lot of people in the care home sector say, well, how quickly are things going to get back to normal, back to December 2019 or January 2020? And my view was my view then and now is they're never going to go back to normal. We have to adjust and adapt to the new climate, and if you don't, you're going to really, really struggle and perhaps not survive.
Well, I mean, you've mentioned a lot of very interesting points in there, Robert. I just want to double click on some of them. So, you can't build anything without a team around you who are extremely high quality and pulling in the same direction. Fully believe that. I think, if you say your split 50% is strategy and vision, 50% is getting people along on the journey. I mean, I would question that balance. I think probably 90% of my role and what I do is ensuring that everyone's going in the same direction and knows what they're doing. So totally agree with that. I guess my question to you is, you spent many, many years building high quality teams and scaling businesses. What is it, whether it's from leadership and management perspective, and also probably more importantly, frontline staff, What is it that you do that makes sure that you've got a team that are really engaged and are doing what you think is the right thing for the company?
Yeah, I think
Talk about the frontline staff, because you talked about your sort of management and leadership a bit.
I mean, somebody asked me, a journalist asked me the other day, why am I still doing this? Well, I hope, you've got an indication of that I'm still energetic and energized and enthusiastic about the sector and about the future. But the two things I love doing are, I love doing deals, and it's not about the size of a deal. I get as much satisfaction from doing a small deal as a larger deal, but also about building teams. I get a huge amount of satisfaction from that, where you say, so-and-so and so-and-so, there's going to be a bit of fireworks initially, but I really think once that initial fireworks are over, I think they're going to be really work well together. And the day-to-day is something I don't enjoy, I'm not good at, and therefore we're back to my father's advice about surrounding yourself with people cleverer and more able in all these areas than you. You should stick at what you're good at. And the only thing I'm good at, really, I think, is maybe in spotting. And it's interesting about choosing senior people. I mean, that's part of the strategy and the vision, I would say, is identifying potential acquisitions through my network and also identifying people to add to our top team to deal with the day-to-day. I'm equally in a business where I think we're about 80% female staff and 20% male staff. And there's an interesting observation on that, which, I've never been necessarily politically correct, so I might as well, why stop now? If there's somebody equally perfect for the job, one male, one female, and you've got a choice to make between the two in a senior role, I will every time pick the female member of staff over the male member of staff. And a number of reasons for that. The more I have found over the years, and this is my experience in the sectors that I've worked in, particularly in social care, that their attention to detail, the just ability to roll the sleeves up and get stuck in is just way better. But you have a problem with female staff and male staff in that every few months, and you can tell this on the phone when you're speaking to them too, you might find with females, but it's different between female and male senior staff. With female senior staff, you have to remind them every wee while how absolutely brilliant they are and how good a job they're doing, because they have a tendency to beat themselves up and talk themselves down. But back to the CVs again, you'll get males sort of embellishing their male people are likely to embellish their CVs than female people are. I find that as well, and with the female senior staff, you have to remind them every wee while what a great job they're doing and how superb they are. With male senior staff, almost at the same frequency, you have to remind them they're not as good as they think they are.
Who reminds you that, Robert?
Pardon?
Do you need anyone to remind you of that?
Well, my wife does that frequently.
Good.
Yeah, and my wife and children do that, but it's the corporate golf days are not what I'm paying them for, etc. That's the male members of staff. Whereas you would never get a female senior member of staff want to go on a golf corporate day. But I digress.
You digress. No, very, very interesting. And then coming back to the frontline staff piece. So you talk about the importance of technology, the importance of allowing flexible working.
Well, on that, in April 22, getting back to the point on that, I pitched to my senior management team that we should undertake a number of staff initiatives. And there was a lot of resistance initially to it, but now, of course, they think it was their idea, which is fine. I keep my mouth shut because that's what being a leader is, or part of what being a leader is. It's selling your strategy and vision to the senior management team and then them taking ownership of it and delivering it at the front line. But I wanted us to introduce flexible working for staff. So saying to somebody, okay, you're a nurse, your personal circumstances, you're a single parent, what hours suit you. This is a job, whether you're
For
posting it in the press or on S1 jobs or whatever, these are the hours, that's it. Is actually saying to people, right, back to the work-life balance again, post-COVID, is what hours suit you for school drop-off, school pickup, etc., and try and build a job round. I mean, we can't compete with Barchesters and HC1s, the big boys. They're the super tankers.
You can't compete in what sense? From a
quite a lot of
recruitment
cases,
efficiency or pay rate?
Pay rates quite often in senior. We're a speedboat against a super tanker. Yeah. So we have to have adaptability, flexibility, and we have to find other ways of being a good place to work, employer of choice, really, against the big corporate boys, although I've huge respect for both James Tugendhat and Pete Calverley. Pete particularly I've known for many, many years. They're both doing a great job running super tankers. But that's another thing where you and I think, have talked about this before, that I'd like Renaissance Care, and I see the future of care homes in the UK, not with all these super tankers. I see it as being lots of speedboats. I see it as being strong regional operators, the future. And our region we have chosen is Scotland. Mm-hmm. There are other reasons for that, because I believe that on staffing and funding, Scotland is better off currently than England. And I'm happy to discuss why. But we've got to give ourselves an advantage. And I feel that we would have enough economies of scale with 35, 40 homes in Scotland, so about double the size that we currently are. Enough economies of scale and to give the staff development. That's another reason why, say, 6 homes in Aberdeen works, because you can give staff development around those 6 homes and in-house develop your deputy managers and managers in-house by having somebody who's a deputy manager at one of the bigger homes going to one of the smaller homes as a manager and then coming back to the big home. You can do all that without people moving house and their kids moving schools. That's why the cluster thing is good financially for the bottom line cutting agency, etc., but also good for staff development. But it's how I wanted flexible working introduced. I also wanted compressed working for managers so that they can do, and we introduced that in April 22, that they can do 4 days. They can do full-time 4 days.
That's very bold.
And there are a number of other things like introducing free sanitary wear products for all our staff, etc. And lots of initiatives that we introduced post this drive I had coming out of COVID in April 22, which at the time people thought, even in-house, thought we were, I was off my trolley, well, I probably am, but they now, it really works. And that has helped us, I feel, agencies, one of the main reasons for keeping, I think our vacancy rate from memory is 4.3% the last time I checked. Our agency, I know from yesterday, is 1.2% average over the last 12 months. And we have another, if you like, staffing and funding issues. We have another staffing issue, overseas staff. That's another change that this government has made. We had employers' national insurance changes. We had national living wage changes, although that's less of an impact in Scotland than in England, because we've had Scottish carers living wage for aged 18 and over at a much higher rate than in England.
So you're not going to be affected by, or not affected in the same way by potential sector pay agreements.
That doesn't affect us, but the overseas staff does, because in rough terms, I've got a third of my 1,500 staff are non-UK.
Wow.
And off that, So you're talking about 450, 480, something like that. And off that, only we have a tier 2 home office license, but only 33, I think, are sponsored
Right.
by us, if you like. Only 33. 300, 330, I think it is, 330, 340 of that total figure are ones that we're working with to solidify their right to remain or what options are open to them. We have a dedicated team looking at assisting them with that. Because without those 400 odd, 470,
we'd be in trouble.
We'd be in doo-doo. And it's a chunk of them are one-sponsored, 30 odd, and then there's over 100 that are leave to remain and are sorted. But there's a large chunk, 300 odd, that are my main focus of concern at the moment as we move from the changes they've made now to the falling off a cliff in 2028. Is it 2028? I think it's 2028. And in the interim between now and then, the government's saving that they're talking about in the interim is bringing in the Carers Fair Pay Agreement, which was a manifesto commitment, which is fine, but is it going to be properly funded? And my concern is, we're back to money again, is that they're going to meet their manifesto commitment, the government, and they're going to introduce Carers Fair Pay Agreement, but it's not going to be properly funded. And you've got to consider the differentials on top of whatever. If they come in with a £15 an hour care, I'd love to pay our staff more, but if your main customer won't pay you, then you have to look at some pretty drastic measures. And we've already closed one care home, Edinburgh, because of the budget changes, and we announced the closure when there was no reversal or sort of phasing in of the employer's national insurance changes, where I was lobbying behind the scenes for a phasing in of it, or for a layering. Because when you lower the threshold from 9.1 to 5, at the same time as going from 13.8 to 15, where that 900,000 extra cost comes from is that lowering of the threshold, and the fact that lots of people were going in April this year from 0 to 15% overnight. That's where that explosion was. And so if you then introduce £15 an hour without proper funding, plus the differentials, then I think without doubt more care homes are going to close, which will lead to more bed blocking, more cancelled operations, and longer NHS waiting lists. Again, it's not rocket science, but my worry about, I'm worried about some of the stuff in the employment rights bill. There's a chunk of stuff they're talking about there that is of concern, but they're talking about phasing it in. So we'll deal with that. But the one that we'll deal with that as and when it comes in. But the Carers Fair Pay Agreement is my current one that is really worrying me, because I feel that could be an extinction event for, sadly, a lot of care homes. I think it could be.
Robert, how's your relationship with your neighbour in Turnberry at the moment?
Actually, I was there the day before he arrived, visiting that care home. I have a care home, Malin Court, adjoining the Trump Turnberry, and I have there's also a house on the site, and there's 11 acres of land adjoining the golf course. I get on okay with them. Eric Trump is the one who looks after all the golf interests, as his father has one or two other things on his plate. But I also make a policy of not picking disputes with people that have their finger on the nuclear button.
What about before he had his finger on the nuclear button? You picked a few disputes then, didn't you?
Well, we had one or two over the fencing that was along on the adjoining fencing. But I would say things are okay.
Relations are improving. That's good.
They are improving. But I wanted to make a point about where I saw, and you'd asked me about this before, the future of the sector.
I think we can finish on that.
We can finish on that. Is that if you, Lang & Buisson, I've got the information here, January 2025, the top 10 care home providers held 18.8% of all UK registered bed capacity. And that is 8.4% down from the peak of 27.2 reached in 2006.
Explain that to me again. So in 2006, 27% of beds were owned by the top 10.
Yeah.
And now it's down to, what number did you say?
Just over 18%.
Interesting. Okay.
So instead of lots of sectors consolidate as we move
which
forward.
Which you'd expect, yeah.
Which you would expect. But it's not just my belief, but there's Langeview data that shows that there has been a more fragmentation of the sector in the last 20 years than a consolidation. And equally, if you look at the two largest care home operators currently in the UK, HC1 Barchester, they're both about 300 care homes in the UK. 20 years ago, I think Four Seasons had about 500 or close to that. Southern Cross, when they went bust in 2011, they had 754.
So what's without going into too much detail, what's driven that? What are the macro factors that have made that happen?
The advantages of being huge are less. You need to be big enough to have a certain amount of economies of scale for staff development, for being able to recruit senior teams.
Procurement, buying things, yeah.
Clinical governance is more of an issue post-COVID. It's a lower margin business post-COVID than pre. So you need a certain amount of economies of scale. But then there is a point where I feel that if you're all over the country and you're too big, if you've got 500-600 homes across the whole of the UK, that's too big. I think the best future in my view for the sector is strong regional players that have enough economies of scale and equally for negotiating supplier contracts, etc. But that's what I see as the future. I think the days of 700-800 homes are gone, and I think that's for the good. The other thing we're doing, as well as trying to double in size at Renaissance Care, is we are beginning our journey we've got experience within the senior management team on specialist care, but we are about to do our first specialist care development, and that's an area where we're looking at playing an important part in our journey going forward from 2025 onwards.
And what does that mean, specialist care? As in specialist dementia care, or rehabilitation post-hospital, or what is it?
I can't. I can't give you an exclusive on what it is because it's still, but it's
top secret.
It's top secret, and it will be subject to gaining planning permission for a site that we have identified that we own to redevelop it for specialist care. So we're excited about that. But generally, try and end on a positive note is that I'm very much a glass half full person as opposed to a glass half empty. And despite all the challenges and issues, and as I said, focusing on Scotland is because I believe that funding and staffing is slightly better placed in Scotland with the National Care Home contract, a double nurse bursary level than England, free personal care, which has been in since 2002, and the Scottish Carers living wage. So I feel we are in better shape in Scotland. So our future is in Scotland to become a strong regional operator. But I do think challenging times lead to interesting opportunities. I'm gearing up and I'm speaking later today about a potential interesting acquisition. It's about how you grow the business in challenging times. And that's what I'm trying not to take my executive team away from their day job. And I'm focusing on looking at the interesting opportunities in challenging times for us to grow the business, because and also looking at new technologies, because there's lots of interesting stuff. We have Nourish in all our homes now. We've moved from having servers in every home to it's all cloud-based now. Pain Check has been a great success. But equally, Older Tech has been a bit mixture of old and new tech. Dance Sing has been a great success and has improved communication between residents and actually improved health and appetite in the homes with residents. That's a really, really interesting one, where it's a mixture of old and new tech. And it's really, when PainCheck's been a great success across the group as well. So I'm excited about the future, and I hope that's come across in our chat. Yeah, and one of the things which I have to keep reminding my finance director, who obviously is very much about balance sheet and profit and loss and whatever, I keep reminding him, and I'll end on this because it is the most important thing, is that our greatest asset at Renaissance Care is our staff. That is our you can't put that on the balance sheet, but our greatest, without the great staff that we have, the amazing staff we have through COVID, but what they do day in and day out, we would be nothing, we would have nothing. And you've got to look after your staff, you've got to appreciate them, value them, and they are our greatest asset. And the staff it's the main reason I'm still doing this at my advanced age and actually still loving it. And I look forward to the future, positive attitude, and I look forward to catching up with you in person sometime very soon.
Robert Kilgour will finish on that note. It's all about the staff. Thank you very much for a very wide-ranging and interesting conversation. See you soon.
Okay, cheers, Charles.
Great. Thank you very much, Mr.
Did that cover enough of what